Okay, we're here. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Rethinking Legal Ops. My name is Ashwarya. I'm the head of legal at Speed Legal, your host. Today, we have a wonderful guest with us, Marc Lauritsen. Marc is an expert in just law and technology and legal tech enthusiast as well. He's worked with Harvard. He's one of the people sort of spearleading the legal tech movement for a very, very long time, and it's just such a pleasure to have you here with us, Marc, and just cannot wait to learn from all your insight from your years and years of experience working with law and technology.
I'm very glad to be here.
And just to kick things off, Marc, I would like to ask you to sort of walk us through your incredible career journey and how you ended up working with legal tech, because you started working with just the integration of law and technology quite early, even before people were sort of thinking about legal tech. So I'd love to know about your journey.
Sure. Yeah, I go way back. Like many of my fellow boomers, I've had a pretty meandering career. I began life after law school as a legal aid lawyer, being a poverty lawyer, representing low-income tenants and families in various kinds of housing and family disputes um, at a legal aid program in Worcester, Massachusetts. And that was exciting, mostly repetitive, routine work, defending tenants against evictions, as I mentioned. And it got me thinking, how can we do this kind of service at scale? I did have one. I inherited a nationwide class action that was potentially affecting a lot of people, but unfortunately, after arguing it in the First Circuit, we lost, and I didn't manage to get the Supreme Court to take it up. So, but anyway, so I did that for many years. I was recruited back to Harvard as a clinical teacher at the Harvard Legal Aid Bureau. So I got involved in legal education, found myself supervising students after only a couple of years of being in practice myself. Um, and in the middle of that, I was pivoted away into technology. We had a large project called Project Pericles back in the mid 80s, which was using mini computers to investigate how we can use technology to improve education and service. And that kind of spun me in my current trajectory. So I've gone off and run a consulting company, done a couple of startups. I'm back into teaching. So, like I say, I've meandered around quite a bit, but it's all been around how can we improve what lawyers do and what clients need through these amazing new technologies.
It's wonderful. And when you started working at Harvard, sort of with the clinic there, what was sort of the reaction that you heard from people about legal tech? Could people understand that you could use technology to do legal work at the time, and how's that different from the attitude today?
Surprisingly similar. I mean, I, I think people were quite receptive. They sort of expected, of course, we can do more with technology. But when it came to actually deploying it, people are going, well, I'm not so fast. We like the way we're doing things already. And maybe this is going to commoditize how we practice if we take too much of legal knowledge and try to put it into machines. So I think I got an early preview of the whole cluster of incentives and disincentives that are still with us today, whether you're talking, a commercial law firm or a law department or a nonprofit organization.
And speaking of nonprofit organizations, in the past in this podcast, we've talked about legal tech being useful for businesses, for law firms, for just like regular consumers. How do you think legal tech can be impactful for nonprofit organizations?
Yeah, I mean, on a couple of levels. One of just as a regular practicing law office, nonprofit programs like legal aid and courts and other similar organizations can take advantage of the effectiveness, skyrocketing power of tools like document automation and expert systems, just like a for-profit organization can. But they also have a larger remit. They're really most of these organizations have a genuine commitment to expanding access to justice, and they realize that they don't have the means themselves to serve every client. As we know in the United States and many other countries, the vast majority of people with legal needs go entirely without any help. And so a lot of these organizations are thinking, how do we provide service at scale using machine-based tools? And that's been a big theme over the last couple of decades.
Right. And you already touched upon this a little bit, but how exactly, apart from assisting, nonprofit organizations provide better services to more people, what are some other ways that legal tech can improve access to legal resources?
I think taking advantage of the web, again, this is old idea, but putting up content that's not simply static content, but interactive, so that as a litigant or a person with a legal problem finds themselves unassisted by any humans, they can at least go to a online resource and be given guidance, given instruction, and increasingly actually taken through a customized interactive questionnaire and have documents generated for them. So we've seen over the last, again, 2 decades, an explosion of such services. They're still only touching a slight percentage of the people that need help, but I think it's a move in the right direction. And that's one of the challenges: is how do we in fact deliver high quality assistance without a human in the loop, but do it at scale to begin to crack the nut of this access to justice gap.
Hmm. And also, like, for companies, and I'm assuming, when they try to sort of go into that space where, I mean, there's chatbots, other services that sort of, like, are providing access to resources to people who cannot maybe go to a lawyer. But one of the trepidations that I've heard, just talking to, like, co-founders and founders of these companies, is that how do you escape the liability? Because that's a pretty big sort of responsibility to take. Have you seen those sort of challenges being faced by companies as well?
Absolutely. I mean, it's one of the first questions. I mean, on at least two levels. One is the liability for providing incomplete or inaccurate guidance, and number two, being vulnerable to challenges from the bar and parties about unauthorized practice. So those are pretty big disincentives. Uh, Nonetheless, I think various services have surmounted them by carefully crafting terms of service and understandings, and by avoiding the perception, at least, that they are actually uh, promoting a trusting lawyer-client relationship, but rather simply providing information, albeit increasingly interactive and customized. So
Mhm.
I think you're right. That's an obstacle, but there are solutions, and I think many vendors have successfully provided them. Some are more, have been more targeted, like LegalZoom, which has, sort of uh, been the pioneer back down on the path in many ways with arrows in its back, but nonetheless has thrived and delivered a great amount of service to people.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And then there's also, like, marketplaces where you can, get access to different types of legal aid clinics and resources available to people. We've been doing some surveys at Speed Legal over the last month, just about trying to understand how much do people even know about their rights and how
Hmm.
aware people are of the resources available to them. And these are Berkeley students in sort of a position where, if they wanted to seek out that information, it's pretty easily available. You're told, you're informed of some of the resources, like, as part of orientation. And yet, like, we got about the 70%, over 70% response that I don't even know my rights and I don't know where to find resources. So that's the reason why I sometimes don't seek help. And that was kind of alarming, because this can happen to, Berkeley students, with access to n number of resources. I cannot imagine what it's like for someone that does not have access to that level of resources within, like, an institutional, within a university that is provided to them as students.
Exactly.
And that's
Yeah,
and that's just such. Please go ahead.
no, I'm just going to very much so. That's a great observation. I think that's one of the other challenges we face is a largely uneducated constituency as to legal proceedings, the rights vocabulary, and yet a lot of these people are forced to into the justice system without any concept of how it works or how they're going to manage it. And
Mhm.
from the court's perspective, it's a crisis. 70-80% of litigants in many practice areas come in unrepresented. The court feels obligated not to advise them because they don't want to engage in unauthorized practice themselves. But it really slows down the process and results in very suboptimal outcomes for most people.
Yeah, exactly. This semester at Berkeley, I also work. I also assist state professors in teaching some classes, and I'm working with this class called Intimate Partner Violence and the Law.
Yeah.
And the family court system. It's just the way the filings work, and just the way the orders are passed, like on both sides, on like the judicial side, like for the from like a state machinery perspective, it's extremely hard to process all of these different types of cases. As you're seeing a lot of people not represented, they may not file things in the right format. And for the general making people fighting in these courts, I mean, they're facing crises, like they don't have access to resources, have never been inside like a court system before. So
Mm.
this is an issue that constantly comes up. And I was recently having a conversation with someone. They were talking about how like the appellate system with regards to like child custody, like if you have a restraining order, you do want to challenge child custody, like that in itself can take up to 2 years to even um, the process like a particular case. And then sometimes you have your doctor return in like 30 days to 6 months, saying that you didn't file this one form correctly, or you didn't check this one box correctly. And it just sounds so frustrating, such an important issue, but not enough resources to fix that. So I'm sure there's some tech tool out there that can automate this process or optimize this process. But which leads me to my next question, Martin, which is like, what are, according to you, some of the most impactful legal tech tools today?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I wanted to react to what you were just saying about students, and sometimes they're really shocked once they find themselves either helping somebody else or, God forbid, finding themselves in the justice system. It's amazing how bad the system appears from the unrepresented litigant perspective. I know I've spent time in the courts in California myself around some eviction defense work we were doing, and it is frightening how easily somebody can be derailed again by not knowing where to appear when, what form to submit, and sometimes that can get you downstream. Uh, there is California, ironically, has one of the most advanced self-help center systems in the country, and they make active use of technologies. To answer your second question, I think again it's an old tech, but it's I think increasingly powerful and relevant. Just interactive document automation to generate the forms. I mean, in California, all the court forms are available as PDFs. Some of them are fillable PDFs, but they lack the accompanying information and guidance about how to fill out the form, and let alone how to create packages. So one of the services that I am especially enthusiastic about is called Law Help Interactive, and it's used in California and other places. And again, it's for a domestic violence situation, for an order of protection, they have interactive questionnaires and dynamic interviews that take a litigant or a helper of a litigant through the process of generating that paperwork so that it is properly filled out and they know where to file it. Obviously, it can't accompany the person to court, but it can save a lot of headache and heartache by generating context specific documentation and guidance. So that's just one example, but I think that across the justice system there are many opportunities to apply this quite old technology very effectively, and now there are dozens of vendors that are trying to do just that.
Mm-hmm. Yes, indeed. I think Utah is a good example too, with their legal sandbox, where like these sort of vendors and tools do have some support from the bar association and the justice system as well. And I cannot agree more with like the fact that these solutions, they seem so simple, and they can be complicated to implement for myriad reasons, and we'll get to that in just a second. But it reminds me of this TV show. It's this very famous Netflix TV show called The Maid. Have you seen it yet?
No, I don't think so. The maze.
The Maid,
Oh, the
MAID.
maze. Yeah,
And
I heard of it, but I have not seen it.
yeah, it's about this young woman. She is going through the justice system, through the family court system in particular,
Mm.
and she has she's in an abusive relationship, and wants to get sole custody of her child. And one of the times that she shows up in court, like she's never really been inside a court before. She's never had to deal with any sort of authority or institution before. So when she enters, this courtroom, and they start, like, the lawyers are just like talking to the judge that this motion was filed, X, Y, Z, and at some
Oh,
point they just switch to saying legal, 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 more legal. What do you think, Alex? Legal? And then she's just standing there like, I don't understand any of this. This is all legal
sure.
jargon being thrown at me. And of course, she freezes, and the courts end up assigning the custody of the child to the father because he has, more financial resources. But she's not able to really explain her story because she doesn't understand what's going
Mm,
on. And I think that that is just, shockingly and unfortunately very, very common within the court system. I guess it's not as
yes.
shocking, but I guess if you're on the outside, it feels, it's very, um, what's the right word for it? It's very, like, sort of, it's like a wake up call to, see that happen on TV and just understand that maybe for us as lawyers, this is like a normal, way to speak, but for most people on this planet, it really isn't. And I think someone needs to fix that. We're talking about creating all these documentation, like clerks in all these courts are just too overworked. They're, these offices often like understaffed. They don't have time to even, like, advise people, go with them, walk them through like how to file each document. And so many errors just keep happening. And it's often that family disputes will get settled outside of court because people just find it easier to just have
Right.
a conversation with each other and come to an understanding rather than go through the system. Now, I don't have the statistics to support this, but like this is what I've heard from just doing a lot of surveys and just talking to people. And I think that's that. That's not how things should be. Um, you
Yeah.
know. Um,
It's an amazingly accurate description of the reality for many people. I mean, the legal mumbo jumbo that doesn't make any sense to them. They're thrown into a bunch of insiders, clerks and lawyers and judges who frequently work with each other, and then out of the blue comes this person who maybe has a one time or a few times interaction with the court system. And you can imagine for somebody with who's for whom English is not even the first language, how much more difficult it is, or who has other perceptual or emotional difficulties trying to interact with this system that where their rights to custody of children or their liberty or their housing is at stake, and yet they are almost utterly helpless. They just don't have enough lawyers, even if they're willing to volunteer their time to deal with
yeah.
it.
Exactly. And so what are like the why is it so hard to bring more legal tech to courts? Because every time I talk to entrepreneurs and I tell them, would they consider, working within the state machinery and like working with the state departments, they're always a little bit like scared of that. I mean, there are companies that are, of course, serving that purpose, but why is selling to governments and government institutions so difficult?
I think selling to anybody is difficult. Lawyers are especially resistant, and of course, many lawyers are in control in the court system. I mean, the courts have got their special challenges. Obviously, they're trying to repair the engine while the plane is flying to some degree, right? So they've inherited a lot of legacy technology, case management systems, and other systems. They're grossly underfunded in most jurisdictions, and they're populated by well-meaning staff who are just overwhelmed. So when somebody shows up with a shiny new object saying, "Hey, here we go, we're going to solve your problems," they're understandably skeptical and somewhat resistant. So I mean, the strategy is small gains, prove the concept in small ways, and try to accelerate progress by relying upon those small gains. But it's a tough sell for courts and more generally for the legal sector.
Hmm. Yeah, and probably would also involve, working sort of in a very hands-on type of approach where you slowly introduce like bits and pieces of the tool rather than like, oh, this is like this completely new platform that you're now supposed to work on. And yeah, I think there's like some cool research happening in like user interfaces, like legal design that could make this part
Hmm.
easier.
Yes.
But just the other day I was talking with a colleague about how frustrating it can be sometimes for me to switch between different types of writing tools. So I use Word a lot. I think that's a gold standard with lawyers. And there are times when I have to use Google Docs to work with, certain my colleagues, and my colleagues in tech, they really like Google Docs. And sometimes I'm like, oh no, I don't know all the keyboard shortcuts. This is frustrating, and that's just such a small thing. So I can totally understand completely shifting your context and using something new, which you're not sure may even work, is a difficult sell. But
Exactly.
I hope.
It is mostly a cultural and emotional challenge, more so than a technical one, right? In many organizations, and people get accustomed to how things work and the way things work, and they know their tools, they know their shortcuts to get things done in their case management system or even their paper system. And when you inject new technologies, it's disruptive and unpleasant, at least at first, for many people.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, absolutely. I mean, but I think the pandemic has gotten the ball rolling on that, a lot sooner than maybe what we would have
Yeah.
expected. And what has been your experience seeing some of the way technology is implemented and while with
Well, I
these?
think your point about the pandemic is a good one. It was, one of the bright aspects, one of the few bright aspects of it is just the ways in which it showed organizations, hey, we can change. Necessity is the mother of invention, and courts in particular have discovered, well, remote hearings are not that crazy, and maybe online tools deserve a place in our repertoire. um, so I think it reveals to us that change is possible, and it's really the motivations that need to be addressed. And just telling somebody it's a good idea generally is not enough. They need to feel emotionally invested in being part of the journey towards a new way of doing things.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think you bring up a very important point there that just creating a shiny tool and just doing a quick demo, it's not enough. You really need to make people understand the impact them using that particular tool might have. I mean, the reason why I mean now, I mean, gas is very expensive, so people are thinking about EVs. But initially, like the biggest sell for EVs was like you're contributing to saving the planet by getting this car, or those like little like sustainability symbols that like brands have, like, oh, this is cruelty free, or this is environmentally friendly. It's just that sort of validation for like customers to be like, I was going to buy a certain product anyway, but I might as well like go with something like this. And similar for legal tech, I mean, the level of impact is so large. I mean, it's not
Hmm.
like it's just something that makes your life easier, but like it can be something that's largely uh, impactful. So I think that messaging around that and building those sort of relationships with potential clients is so important. Um, the other thing that I've been sort of thinking about, Mark, is like we've talked about what like sort of tasks can be good for automation, and legal tech can be helpful there. Are there any
Hmm.
particular areas of law that you see that legal tech can be particularly useful in?
Um, I think it's universally useful. There are certain areas of practice that historically have been much more amenable. Estate planning, for instance, often is one of the forerunners in document automation because they're heavily invested in carefully crafted wills and trusts and other instruments. Um, and most of that work is amenable to algorithmic treatment, at least for first drafts. But almost all the transactional practice has got that capacity, where you're doing routine work and you don't want to, you're not going to hand over your job to the computer, but you can get ahead of the process, maybe get 80% of the initial drafting done very quickly by interacting with an intelligent tool. On the litigation side, I think there's often of automatability as well. And so I think the main strategy is across the entire spectrum of this, is just sort of looking at your practice. What's the nature of the work I'm doing? How much of that work, in fact, is has got an underlying structure and replicability about it? Can I hand that off to an automated process? Myself as a practitioner, spend more time on the creative, human, interactive, strategic dimensions of practice. So, um, yeah, I mean, I think it's possible everywhere, and certain practice areas just historically have been more more pioneering in using it than others.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I've also been wondering how much of because I'm one of the believers that like in order to make like sort of lasting change, it has to make although like I would like it to be a little different, but it has to make like more economic sense. And I think for legal tech
Mm,
as well, some of this adoption has been like client driven. Because I was talking with a fintech GC, and he was telling me that like there are still times where he prefers to just go meet people in person, but clients are saying no, just do a Zoom meeting. Like we don't need to meet in person. We
mm,
can save everyone's time. And even for like law firms, like clients are coming in and asking, we don't want to go by the billable hour method anymore.
mm,
We want like a
right.
sort of like a fixed quote. And you can use tools to automate some parts of the work, because if you're not using any tools, we know you're going to take like 10 hours with just like doc review, and that's
Yeah.
like I think 15. How much is that? Yeah, in California that could be hundreds of thousands of dollars, and like big law uh, prices. So
Yeah.
I think there's that element that's been encouraging as well. But
Yeah.
personally, for me, I want to see it happen more, sort of in like the nonprofit world, and sort of more like
Mm,
expanding access to legal resources without needing those level of significant financial incentives. I don't know what like the business models for a lot of companies like similar to LegalZoom would look like in order to truly revolutionize that. But I can't wait to see it. Um,
yeah.
when we were
Let me react to what you were saying there a bit. I think the billable hour, I mean, is often held up as one of the main obstacles to technology adoption, which I think has got a ring of truth to it, because there's a natural, at least even subconscious, disincentive to become more efficient if you're billing by your time. Uh, but I think that obstacle is dwarfed by so many other resistance points in any organization, and the fact that in a nonprofit organization, which does not typically bill at all, and maybe not even track time, a lot of the same resistances show up. I think there's it goes back to this cultural kind of professional resistance to having your discrete, your specialized expertise somehow being replicated in a machine, and I didn't go to law school to be sitting there pushing buttons and generating documents. I'm using my own knowledge and expertise and highly nuanced thinking to accomplish this. And I think there's some element of truth to that as well. But the hybrid, the combination of the artificial and human, to me, is the way forward.
Yeah, no, I do fully agree, and it's very interesting that you bring up the point that like nonprofits are not even using like the billable hour, but there's still some of like the similar resistance, and I don't even think that legal tech is something that should or even can entirely replace lawyers, because some of the way that we reason through issues, we analyze issues, what we're taught in law school. I don't know, maybe at some point AI can become intelligent, but I don't think so anytime soon, or that that sort of reasoning skills should be given even to AI. I've been doing some just like some cursory reading in some of the risk factors of that as well, and that could be a whole different sort of conversation, because we don't know what that sort of advanced artificial intelligence is like, moral values, or what their sort of style of thinking could be, and how they could replicate human reasoning. So I don't think that's something that should like totally completely replace the legal profession. But yeah, that combination of human function augmented and optimized by AI is sort of my dream, and sort of like a future where if at some point you needed to go see a lawyer, you could do that. But going to a lawyer or going through the legal system, court system, should not be so intimidating for people that are just simply seeking justice, or some form of basic remedy. That's the part that breaks my heart when people are like, I would rather just not go get this remedy that I'm fully entitled to in any situation, than go through
Mm,
that whole system. Uh, Reminds me of something that my grandfather was an attorney, as
Oh,
well. And he used to say, jokingly, that may no one ever have to visit two people, and those would be one a doctor and the second a lawyer. So, because if you're going to one of these two, then like you're in some form of trouble. So like
trouble. Yeah,
hopefully your life, like you stay healthy and you stay out of any form of like legal trouble or
yeah,
having to seek a remedy because it's just a painful
exactly.
process.
I mean, it's interesting because as you know, I do adjunct teaching, and I've been teaching courses for many years, in which students build apps as part of their casework. Uh, but increasingly, my courses have become much more focused on the distinctively human skills. And recently, we had a doctor come present to my class on. I do a course on decision making. Come and present a scenario of, of how you advise clients or patients serious illnesses, maybe end of life decisions. And just reminding folks again that when you go to the doctor or you go to a lawyer, you're not generally not there for a good reason that you want to be there, right? Uh,
Yeah.
and and the skills of which I think is not replicable by computer in any time soon, the skills of counseling a human being who's facing a tough problem, whether it's in medicine or in law, is an important thing that law students need to spend more time thinking about before they get out into the profession. And I'm not sure where I was going with that, but I just wanted to riff on your point about the medical and the legal. And many professionals tend to get desensitized to the situations in which their clients or patients find themselves.
Yeah, yeah. In the court systems as well, I think, again, going back to the family court system, family law courts,
Mm.
the commissioners there, tend to be extremely overworked. And, like, at some point, you're just going to get desensitized. I've read some studies about just the mental toll it takes to be an expert witness in these cases, to be
Oh
a
boy,
commissioner in this
yeah,
in these cases, and that sort of burnout, emotional, like mental burnout, does very much happen. And then so like when you see sort of cases which are not properly filed, just very likely to be like, I don't care, like, and it just
it's hard.
prolongs the process, makes it very difficult for people on the outside, while people on the inside are just struggling, just if not
Absolutely.
just as much, but like significantly. Um,
Hmm. Yep,
it's
I
difficult.
agree.
And I was reading also about your course, and it's so inspiring to hear that you actually make your students design. You let them design these like apps as part of the course, and I
Right.
think that's incredible
Yeah.
that you're doing that. How much do you think legal tech and just technology in general should be part of law school curriculum?
I think it's inescapable. I mean, it's so much part of current law practice and the legal sector in general, and it's increasingly becoming so. I think we're in a century where the rise of non-biological intelligence is probably one of the most significant developments. So I think law schools have got a real duty to help students achieve a decent level of competency in the basic skills of using Word and Excel and Outlook and other tools that they'll find in practice. But increasingly, getting them to think about the future. How can we take advantage of these emerging technologies, which is really where I try to focus. It's okay, guys. We're not going to teach you the shortcuts for Word today, but we're going to have actually throw you into a platform and have you create an interactive application. And don't be afraid. None of these guys have done software before, but you can do it. You can express some of your expertise and wrestle with this software, and that kind of a skill I think is also essential. So I'm not alone, of course. There are dozens of folks now who are doing courses like this around the country at Berkeley, and I assume at Berkeley, certainly at Stanford and other law schools. So it's a slowly growing movement. uh,
Yeah.
but to me, it becomes a prism through which not only to learn about what technology can do, but to re-examine totally non-technological legal skills,
Yeah.
interviewing, counseling, argumentation, drafting. How do we do these historical and legal jobs more effectively, and how to be a lawyer by teach machines how to think like lawyers? That's one of my mantras.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah. No, I think that's wonderful, and such a great opportunity for students to like really think outside of the box. At Berkeley, we do have sort of similar courses. Like they're teaching like coding for lawyers, so like very very basic Python, and
Yeah.
they have like some simulations where you can come up with like entrepreneurial um,
Hmm.
ideas because it's just so important to get lawyers to like understand that you don't just there's not just two routes, which is like big law or like in-house or like maybe you could go to nonprofit, but there
Hmm.
are so many like there's a sea of opportunities if you really sort of get people to look beyond what sort of the very laser focus is for people like uh, when they are in law school. And then I think part of the reason why like people are reluctant to take up these sort of technically risky-ish ventures, just go become an entrepreneur. I think it's law school is very expensive and the debt, but that could be a whole different topic for another
Hmm.
day. When I moved here and I learned how expensive law school is, it costs about 150K. I was like,
That's
yeah,
amazing.
yeah, no wonder. Yeah.
Yeah. Amazing. Yeah. Yeah. And
Yeah.
the, and the, and the bar and the bar exam, that's a whole other topic. I mean, the way in which we judge competency and the amount of energy and money being spent simply to pass the bar in order to be able to practice when there's such
Yes,
a dramatic need for legal talent. Um,
absolutely.
but
Yeah.
on the positive side, we're in an age of blue oceans, right? There are plenty of entrepreneurial opportunities, whether it's in-house or just totally free. And I think a lot of our job as educators is trying to inspire the next generation to think beyond, the traditional career paths, to do something totally different and awe-inspiring.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think, and that's what really, personally, that's what really drives me because when I was in law school, I saw nothing wrong with those traditional paths, but I just didn't see myself in them. And just the type of exposure I got to, the different professors and students and like at Berkeley and like just the entrepreneurial spirit helped me understand that there's just this whole other opportunities. I mean, lawyers can be content creators. It could be, entrepreneurs. It could be like product development people. It could be legal
Mhm.
solutions engineer, which is my favorite combination of three words: steady Eddie. I think
Yeah.
wonderful like legal solutions architect, things
Mm.
like that, and it just it gives me so much hope and makes me so excited for what the next 10 years in the digital transformation of law are going to look like. And I'm very grateful to be able to sort of witness it from where I am.
Me too. Yeah, I'm hoping to hang around for a good while longer. I've spent a lot of years seeing this come and go, and it's sometimes hard to maintain your optimism after you see so many great ideas, you know, burn out. But but I do. My basic instinct is we're at the edge of a real transformation of how law is done, and it's an exciting time to be present, to be either a law student or a superannuated law student like me, and a lot to learn, a lot to accomplish yet.
Yes, yeah. And on that note, thank you so much, Mark, for this wonderful conversation. I learned so much, and it's so important, like the insights you brought in, sort of comparing the some of the resistance that existed when you started out with like law and technology to now, like some of that is similar. Really, just boils down to like like social and like cultural, like, emotional, like
Hmm.
maybe associations. I think with technology, and that is so much to think about, and I'm sure listeners have learned a lot. So thank you very much for this conversation. We
You're very
appreciate
welcome.
it.
My pleasure.
And thank you again to our listeners for tuning in every Thursday. We'll be here next week again with another wonderful speaker. So keep the momentum going, keep learning more about legal tech, and keep educating more people about legal tech. And as Mark said, we are at the edge of a real transformation. So it's exciting.